Imagine this: a cold cemetery, rain falling slowly, the coffin still hanging above the grave. A woman named Emily Carter kneels in front of her father's burial site. She hasn't even buried him yet. Suddenly, footsteps approach. A man in a black suit stands beside her. He doesn't offer comfort. He doesn't offer sympathy. Instead, he hands her a stack of papers and calmly says, "You've been served. Divorce papers." People freeze. The priest stops speaking. The rain feels heavier. But what this man doesn't know is that this funeral will not destroy Emily. It will expose him. Emily Carter was never loud. She was raised by her father, Robert Wilson, a humble school teacher who believed dignity mattered more than money. When Emily married Daniel Carter, he wasn't rich yet. He was ambitious and impatient. At first, Daniel admired Emily's simplicity. But as his business grew, his respect disappeared. He started calling her unproductive, useless, a financial burden. Emily stayed quiet, because her father taught her that character is revealed under pressure. Then Robert Wilson fell seriously ill. Emily stayed by his hospital bed every single night. Daniel never came, not once. When Robert passed away, Emily lost the only man who ever truly protected her, and Daniel saw opportunity. He believed grief would weaken her. He believed timing would give him power, so he chose the funeral. Rain-soaked black coats. Mourners stood in silence. As the coffin was lifted above the grave, Daniel stepped forward. In front of everyone, he handed Emily the papers and said quietly, "Sign these. You have nothing left anyway." Whispers spread through the crowd. She's broke. She's alone. She's finished. Emily looked at the papers. Then she looked up, and she said softly, "I'll sign, but not today." Daniel smiled. He thought he had already won. 3 days later, Emily received a message from an elderly woman named Margaret Lewis, a longtime friend of her father. Margaret handed Emily a sealed envelope. Inside were documents Robert had prepared years ago, something Daniel never knew. Before his death, Robert Wilson had quietly invested in a small startup. That startup later became the parent investor of Daniel Carter's company. Robert never told Emily, because he believed the right time would reveal the truth. And now that time had come. Daniel arrived at court confident, smiling, already planning his future. The judge opened the file, then paused. He read it again, and finally looked up. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "this divorce cannot proceed." The courtroom went silent. Then the judge continued, "Mrs. Emily Carter is the primary beneficiary of the trust that owns your company." Daniel's face drained of color. Emily stood up, calm, steady, and said, "My father didn't raise a rich woman. He raised a prepared one." That day, Daniel lost everything. The company, the control, the illusion of superiority. Later, Emily visited her father's grave. No tears this time, only gratitude. She whispered, "They thought I was broken, but you left me something stronger than money." Never underestimate a quiet woman, especially when she stands on her father's legacy. 3 days after the funeral, the house felt empty. Not quiet, empty. Emily Carter sat alone at the dining table, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. Daniel hadn't called. Not once. To him, the marriage was already over. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Emily opened it to find an elderly woman standing there, holding a small leather folder tightly against her chest. Her name was Margaret Lewis. She looked at Emily with tired eyes and said softly, "Your father asked me to find you. If you ever needed the truth." Emily invited her in. They sat across from each other, the silence heavy between them. Margaret slowly placed the folder on the table. Inside were documents, legal papers, investment records, and a letter, written in her father's handwriting. Robert Wilson's letter was short. He wrote that he never wanted Emily to depend on money, but he wanted her protected from people who would mistake kindness for weakness. Years ago, Robert had quietly invested his savings into a small, struggling company. He never spoke about it. He never took credit. That company later merged, expanded, and became something much bigger, something Daniel Carter proudly called his own. Emily's hands trembled as she read further. The trust, the ownership structure, the beneficiary name, her name. For the first time since her father's death, Emily cried. Not from pain, from understanding. The day of the court hearing arrived. Daniel walked in confidently, dressed sharply, already discussing future plans with his lawyer. He barely looked at Emily. To him, she was just a signature waiting to happen. The judge entered. Files were opened. The room was calm, until it wasn't. The judge stopped reading. He adjusted his glasses. Then read the page again. Silence stretched. Finally, the judge looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Carter," he said, "there appears to be a significant issue with this case." Daniel's smile faded. The judge continued. "The company listed as your primary asset is owned by a trust, and that trust's majority beneficiary is your wife, Mrs. Emily Carter." The courtroom froze. Daniel stood up immediately. "That's impossible," he said sharply. "She doesn't own anything." The judge looked unimpressed. "According to these documents," he replied, "she owns far more than you realized." Emily slowly stood. Not to argue, not to celebrate, just to speak. She looked at Daniel for the first time in weeks, and calmly said, "You thought I had nothing because I never talked about money. You thought grief made me weak. You thought silence meant ignorance." Her voice didn't shake. "My father didn't raise a rich woman," she continued. "He raised a woman who knew when to stay quiet and when to stand." Daniel's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. The truth was unavoidable. The divorce was finalized, but not the way Daniel planned. He lost controlling interest in the company. He lost authority. He lost the power he believed defined him. Weeks later, Emily returned to the cemetery. The sky was clear this time. She placed flowers beside her father's grave and stood there quietly. No anger, no bitterness. "Only clarity," she whispered. "They thought I was broken. They thought I was finished. But you prepared me, even when I didn't know it." Emily walked away stronger than she had ever been. Not because she won, but because she was never as powerless as they believed. And somewhere, Daniel Carter learned the hardest lesson of all. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never underestimate a woman standing on her father's legacy.